Thomas and friends, making tracks to great destinations. The island of Sodor is surrounded by beautiful blue seas. There are trees of green and sandy yellow beaches. There are windmills and quarry mines and docks for the visitors to the island arrive. Who's that puffing down the track? It's Thomas! Hello, Thomas! Hello! And welcome to the island of Sodor! On the Fat Controller's Railway, being pretty and pristine is a big priority. James doesn't care too much about work unless it does with coaches. Of course, all he cares about is keeping himself clean. But just because an engine is clean doesn't mean that they can forget about their jobs or be held in higher regard. James in a mess. One day, James was coming from the quarry. He was very mad. He was covered in quarry dust. Why couldn't Percy go to the quarry? Or anyone else but me? James yelled. It was a very busy day for everyone today. But you, of course, Percy protested. Oh, whatever, James replied. That's when the Fat Controller came. He told the engines that they needed to be polished and clean for the important visitor coming the next day. James was very excited. He was dusty from all the dust at the quarry, shunting trucks and whatnot. And James, I need you to take the mail train tonight. And if you have enough time, could you take the flying kipper, please? The Fat Controller contested. So James hurried off, leaving all the engines behind. James is making a delivery of mail to the quarry. His driver told him that his letter was on the train tonight. When he went around the corner, he started to tip over. That's when he remembered his first day on Sodor, when he had his biggest crash ever. His brakes were blind, but he just started to tip over and over. He zipped around the corner and he crashed. Luckily, his driver and fireman had jumped clear. My splendid red paint! My boiler! My buffers! Just why? The next morning, the Fat Controller came. He was not very happy. And you think that you're getting polished and clean, or even repaired? He boomed. James knew that he was sad after he rolled his R's. I'm sorry, sir. Please, I'm sorry, sir. Please. The next day, James was brought to the engine works. But Henry didn't feel bad for him. He didn't get the flying kipper done. James said sorry, but Henry didn't care. James doesn't understand. But after he finally understood, after Henry left, he noticed that he needed to be humbled. Because he didn't mean to do any bad thing. He just wished that he wasn't always so vain. So now when he's asked to go to the quarry, he didn't fuss. And he doesn't ask to be cleaned anymore. He only gets cleaned when it's allowed or mandatory. Later that day, James was offered to take the important passenger, but Emily really wanted to, so he put down the offer. Thank you so much, James. That's very, very nice of you. Weird. But how long will James stay humbled? It's James, so I guess we'll never know. engines on the island of Sodor are many colours. Blue, red, brown and more is just the simplification. James is very proud of his red paint and doesn't like it when other people ruin it. He gets pretty mad. Spick and span. Everyone was at Titmuth's sheds right after Gordon had sent away Diesel, or at least with his delivery. Gordon was in charge since the Fat Controller earlier that morning was sick. Earlier that morning, Gordon told James that he was in the best dressed engine competition. James was very excited, and Gordon puffed away. James puffed away to go to Brendam Docks. He was just puffing past when Salty was reversing with some trucks full of flour. "Whoa, Salty! Stop!" James yelled, but Salty's engine had filled his hearing and couldn't hear James at all. And he had rammed into James! The flour flew into the air and landed on James's boiler. "Oh no, my paintwork! Salty!" James yelled. "Me hearty, I didn't hear you. I'm very sorry, but you probably should have moved. Hopefully you can get cleaned up," Salty said. Soon Salty moved out of his way, and James continued out of his way, hoping that the rest of his day would go right. James was headed to the engine works when a rock hit his boiler and scraped off some paint. James was furious. He was trying to stay his best and couldn't because nature was just being itself. He slowly puffed away to the engine works. The workmen were very excited to see him there. They had a whole plan she worked out. "You're looking great, James, so why the sad face?" a workman said. "Oh, things just aren't going my way and it's making me cross," James said. "Well, don't stress, because you're to look your best," another workman said. James started to feel a little bit happier, but not fully. James got a shiny new blue pair of wheels and a new coat of paint with added decals. James was absent for a few hours, but soon was back on the tracks. James felt like a new engine by tea time. That's when the competition started. James was proud of his paint and new design, but he didn't feel like he was going to win. "Go, James!" Thomas said. James was surprised to hear Thomas saying caring things to him, as he didn't have the nicest history with him. "You got this, James!" Mavis yelled. James was speechless when he heard a Diesel saying nice things to him, as he didn't have a very good history with them either. But no one saw Diesel sitting on the side. He didn't want any engine from Titmuth to win, so he was going for James. He had his black paint ready. He and his evil crew measured and knew it was enough to cover him and his tender. It was nearing the end of the show when Diesel was about to take action. James was just passing Wellsworth when Diesel stopped his hardest. "Oops." He laughed to himself. The paint flew into the air. "Oh!" James yelled. He put on his brakes. "Hey, keep on moving. The show has to continue," an engine said. "Oh, it stopped. Gotta keep puffing, man." But James couldn't do anything. The paint was flying in the air, and it all happened at once. James had turned all black from his tender to his cab. "My beautiful paintwork," James said. "Well, because of you, the show was at a standstill, and now, well, none of us can win," the engine said behind him. James felt humiliated. "I'm sorry," he said. The next morning, when all the paint was scraped off and he had his old coat again, the Fat Controller appeared out of nowhere. James was astonished to see him coming up. I see that you've gotten better, sir, James said. And I see that you're back to normal. Are you okay? The Fat Controller asked. Yeah, I'm okay, but I'd rather be back with all my friends and obviously, well, being useful. We'll get to it! Okay, sir. You can go, James. Oh, yes, I'll do that. Oh, James. When James came home, all the engines knew he would have won if it weren't for Diesel. James was happy he had friends like the ones he had, but they all missed the old James. But were very appreciative about his mature change. When it comes to age, Edward is definitely the oldest. Edward knows his age doesn't matter because he might be old, but he's still very useful, helpful and reliable. Some engines make fun of Edward, but he doesn't care because he knows he's a really useful engine. Edward the Great. One morning at Tigner's sheds, James was boasting about how useful he was. All the engines knew James wouldn't stay nice and polite for much longer. Edward is old and he can't do anything, James said, unlike me, who got into the best dressed engine competition. James, what happened to your nice side? Edward asked. Nice? I'm grown out of that, James said. James was trying to be proud and older and seem more mature, but the engines liked his other form better. Oh, James, if you'd grown up, you'd probably had stayed like that, Gordon said. I agree. Hush, little Thomas. Oh! Edward and Toby were having great fun. They were going to let this play on for a little longer. They were good friends and thought some things were very funny. Oh, whatever you say, James, Edward chuckled. Yes, whatever you say, Toby continued, and Edward puffed away. At Brendam Docks, Salty was being called names by Spencer. Salty felt very unhappy. I'm sorry, me hearty. You're insane, thinking I'm to take the flower. I'm to take the stone, Spencer argued. Salty was never called insane. He felt like crying. He was so sad. Spencer gave him a bump. Salty oiled back. Edward puffed up. Hey, what's going on here? Edward asked. But Spencer didn't listen. He kept on saying rude things to him and bumping him to an extent. Get away, Edward, before he comes for you, he said. He turned his eyes to Spencer. It was a true accident, me hearty. A real one, okay? I can get your trunks right now. I don't care. You've been doing this for years now. And is it that hard to pay attention? He wished. Edward was astonished. He had never watched or heard anyone talk to each other like that on Sodor. That's when James puffed up. He was going a little fast and didn't put his brakes on fast enough and bumped into Edward. Move out of the way, you old bucket of steel. He should have been out of action years ago. Hold on, James. No! I don't care. Move! You're in my way. Edward was old and knew exactly what to say. Oh, the railway I came from long ago. If engines started to argue, they'd be torn apart. And that goes for you too, James and Spencer, Edward explained. Salty was confused, and so was James. So they stopped. Spencer rolled away. Salty got Spencer's trucks. He was still frightened. Later in the day, Edward was resting in the yard. He was about to go to sleep when he heard a whistle. It took him a minute to think about whose whistle it was when James ran through the station. Oh, Edward, help! Oh, Edward, please! Oh, please! There's something wrong with my brakes! I can't stop! Oh, but I'm not fast enough, even though he was. Oh, help! Oh, help! He called. Edward went to chase down James before he crashed. Oh! Hey, stop me! So he went to go on to the points. He yelled, "Point!" And he went to go chase James before he had a massive crash. James flew on the hill and down the bend! Edward puffed as fast as possible to keep up with him. He was fast, but he didn't think he was fast enough. "I will stop, James! I have to stop, James!" he yelled. He finally had caught up. He was ready to do something he had never done before. He got onto his running board and threw a rope his driver did, and it barely landed on James's buffers. He made it very tight and jumped back into his cab. He applied the brakes. "Whoa!" Edward moaned. James said he was hoping everything would go right. And it did. Ooh. Phew. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Edward, James said. "But why'd you help me after what I said to you this morning?" "I didn't want you to get hurt," Edward said. Oh, you should have left me to crash. I mean, I don't deserve any of what just happened." "You don't, but I think you do." And he puffed away. James was left with that sentence in his head to think about, but he didn't know what to do now. He reached and closed his eyes and sat there thinking. Then two, there four, there six, there eight, shunting trucks and hauling freight, red and green and brown and blue. They're the really useful crew, all with different roles to play. Round Tidmouth sheds all far away, down the hills and round the bends. Thomas and his friends. It's Thomas and he's the cheeky one. James is vain but lots of fun. Percy pulls the mail on time and Gordon thunders down the line. Emily really knows his stuff. Henry toots and huffs and puffs. Edward likes to help and share. Toby, well, he's wise and square. There two, there four, there six, there eight, shunting trucks and hauling freight, red and green and brown and blue.